original story narrated exclusively for love written in silence. The greenhouse door stood open, and inside, Cecilia Prescott bent over a drawing of foxglove with hands that had learned long ago not to shake. Her mother's voice cut through the morning air like a blade through silk. "Cecilia, your sister needs the green ribbons." That evening, in a salon blazing with 100 candles, Rosalind played piano, while their mother stood beside her, like a jeweler displaying a perfect stone. And when the Duke of Hartwell's eyes drifted to the corner, where Cecilia sat, with her Latin text, something shifted in the room that would break everything her mother had built. He rose, crossed 40 feet of polished floor, and asked the question no one had ever thought to ask. "And what does the quiet one do?" Morning light filtered through the glass panels of the Ashfield greenhouse, turning the air golden and warm. Cecilia Prescott sat at her work table with a brush in one hand and a specimen of Digitalis purpurea in the other, her attention so complete that the world beyond the glass might not have existed at all. The foxglove lay pinned to a corkboard, its purple bells precise and deadly beautiful. She had been working on this plate for 3 days. 47 completed illustrations lay in careful stacks in the cabinet behind her. Medicinal plants, each rendered with scientific accuracy and artistic grace. The Rosa gallica with its layered petals. The Bellis perennis, common as grass and perfect in its simplicity. The corrected Linnaeus plates that proved the second volume's engravings were inadequate in both proportion and detail. No one knew they existed. Her father had taught her this. Sir William Prescott, baronet of modest means and a modest passion for natural science, had given her his library, his Latin, his way of seeing the world as a series of problems that precision could solve. He had died 2 years ago. The greenhouse was the only part of him that remained. She mixed a deeper shade of purple on her palette, testing it against the specimen's throat. The color had to match exactly. Mr. Thorne, the London bookseller who served as intermediary with the publisher, had written 3 weeks ago with encouraging news. The herbal guide was nearly commissioned. They wanted 12 plates to start. Pseudonym C.W. Prescott. No one suspected the artist was a woman. No one suspected the artist was anyone at all. Cecilia set down her brush and flexed her fingers. Through the glass she could see the path that led from the main house, bordered by hedges her father had planted when she was 8. The morning was still and clear. She returned to the foxglove's lowest bell, adding shadow where the petal curved inward. Footsteps on gravel. Her mother's voice carried through the open door with the sharpness of long practice. "Cecilia, where have you put yourself?" Cecilia did not look up. "The greenhouse, Mama." Lady Harriet Prescott appeared in the doorway, her morning dress immaculate, her expression already impatient. She glanced at the work table without seeing it. "Your sister needs the green ribbons for this evening, the ones with the silver edge. Go and find them. They're in the blue box in her wardrobe. Then fetch them for her. She is practicing and cannot be disturbed." Lady Harriet's gaze drifted over the foxglove plate, as though it were part of the table itself. "We are expected at Lady Cavendish's salon tonight. The Duke of Hartwell will be in attendance. Rosalind must look perfect." Cecilia set down her brush. "Of course, Mama. Wear the ivory muslin. It does well enough." Lady Harriet turned and left, her footsteps retreating down the path. Cecilia looked at the foxglove. The plate was half finished. She would not return to it until tomorrow. She cleaned her brushes in silence, corked the paint pots, and covered the specimen with damp cloth. Through the greenhouse glass, she could hear the faint sound of piano scales from the house. Rosalind had been practicing since dawn. The salon blazed with light. 100 candles turned Lady Cavendish's drawing room into a stage, and on that stage Rosalind Prescott sat at the piano like a woman born to be watched. Her hands moved over the keys with flawless precision, her posture perfect, her expression serene. She played Marchetti, then Handel, then something Italian that Cecilia did not recognize. The room listened in silence. Lady Harriet stood beside the piano, positioned so that every eye that admired Rosalind would see her mother as well. She wore satisfaction like a shawl. Cecilia sat in a chair by the window with a book in her lap. Systema Naturae, Linnaeus, the Latin edition her father had given her on her 16th birthday. She was not reading it. She was watching her sister. Rosalind's face was calm, but Cecilia knew the tension in her shoulders, the slight stiffness in her wrists. She had been practicing for 8 hours. Her hands would ache tonight. The final chord rang out. The room erupted in applause. Lady Harriet's voice rose above the noise, clear and warm, and perfectly calibrated. "Your Grace, you see how we have been blessed. The beautiful one plays piano." Cecilia's gaze flicked to the man standing near the fireplace. The Duke of Hartwell. Tall, dark-haired, perhaps 30, with a face that revealed nothing and eyes that revealed even less. He inclined his head toward Rosalind with polite appreciation. Then his gaze drifted across the room, past the piano, to the chair by the window. Cecilia felt the weight of it before she understood what was happening. His eyes settled on her with a focus that made her breath catch. The room was still applauding. Lady Harriet was smiling. Rosalind was rising from the piano bench. The Duke's voice cut through the noise, quiet and clear. "And what does the quiet one do?" The applause faltered. Heads turned. Lady Harriet's smile froze. "Your Grace?" He did not look at her. He was already moving, crossing the room in long strides, his attention fixed on Cecilia with an intensity that made 40 people fall silent. He stopped in front of her chair. "May I?" Cecilia stared at him. Her throat was dry. She managed a nod. He sat in the chair beside hers, angling his body so that the room could see his back and nothing else. His voice dropped to a register, meant only for her. "What are you reading?" She looked down at the book in her lap as though she had forgotten it was there. "Linnaeus, Your Grace, the Latin." "What are you reading it for?" The question was so direct that she answered without thinking. "I am illustrating it. The plates in the second volume are inadequate." Something changed in his face. Not a smile, not surprise, something that looked like recognition or relief, or both. He leaned forward slightly. "Inadequate how?" "The proportions are wrong. The digitalis purpurea plate shows the bells too wide and the leaves too narrow. If a physician used that illustration to identify the plant in the field, he might choose the wrong specimen. Foxglove can heal or kill, depending on the dose. You are correcting Linnaeus. I am correcting the engraver." The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile. "Have you published your corrections?" "Not yet." "Why not?" She met his eyes. They were gray, she realized. Dark gray, like slate. "Because no one has asked to see them, Your Grace." The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was charged. Behind him, the room was beginning to recover. Conversations resumed in low murmurs. Lady Harriet's voice rose again, too bright, directing someone toward the refreshment table. The Duke did not move. "I should very much like to see them. They are at home. Then I will call on you. Your Grace, or better." He rose, and the room's attention snapped back to him like a rope pulled taut. He raised his voice just enough to carry. "Lady Harriet, I am hosting a house party at Hartwell in a fortnight. I should be honored if both your daughters would attend." Lady Harriet's composure was a mask that had cracked at the edges. She smiled, but her eyes were bright with something that was not pleasure. "Your Grace, we are overwhelmed by your kindness." "Then you accept." It was not a question. "Of course, Your Grace." He inclined his head, then looked down at Cecilia once more. His voice dropped again, meant only for her. "Bring your Linnaeus." He walked away. Cecilia sat frozen in her chair, the book heavy in her lap, her heart beating so hard she thought the room might hear it. Across the salon, Rosalind caught her eye. Her sister's expression was unreadable. Lady Harriet's smile was fixed and brilliant, and absolutely furious. Marcus Vane, Duke of Hartwell, stood in his study 3 hours later and stared at the letter on his desk without reading it. His hands were flat on the polished wood. His jaw was tight. He had crossed the room. In front of 40 witnesses, in Lady Cavendish's salon, he had heard a mother dismiss her daughter with casual cruelty. The beautiful one plays piano, and he had crossed the room because he could not bear to stay where he was. He had not planned it. He had not even known he was going to move until he was already standing in front of her chair. The quiet one. She had looked up at him with dark eyes that held no expectation, no performance, no plea. She had answered his question about Linnaeus as though they were alone in a library, not a salon full of people watching her be seen for the first time in her life. "The plates are inadequate." She had said it with the calm certainty of someone who knew she was right. and did not need anyone to confirm it. Marcus sat down heavily in his chair. 8 years ago, his brother Frederick had fallen in love with Miss Catherine Holt, a vicar's daughter, warm, intelligent, without fortune. The love had been genuine. Frederick had been 22, bright-eyed, certain. Their grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, had summoned Marcus to her sitting room and spoken in the voice she used for final judgments. "If Frederick marries that girl, I will cut him from the estate, the family, the name. You will speak to him." Marcus had been 24, newly titled, still learning what it meant to carry a dukedom. He had gone to Frederick and spoken the language of reason, the family's position, the girl's prospects if she married into hostility, the practical impossibility. Frederick had listened because he trusted his older brother. He had broken with Catherine Holt. She had married a merchant in Bristol. Frederick had joined the Navy and had not spoken to Marcus in 8 years. Marcus leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. When Lady Harriet Prescott had stood beside that piano and said, "The beautiful one plays piano," he had heard his own voice 8 years ago, telling Frederick that Catherine Holt was a country attachment, not a future. When he had looked across the room and seen Cecilia Prescott sitting alone with her Latin text, watching her sister with protective tenderness and no envy at all, he had seen what he should have seen 8 years ago when he looked at Catherine Holt. A person, not an inconvenience, not a problem to be managed. A person with a mind and a life, and a right to be asked what she did. He had crossed the room because he could not bear to be the man who did not cross the room. Not again. But his interest in her was not rescue. It was reckoning. And if she ever discovered that, she would be right to walk away. Marcus opened his eyes and reached for a piece of paper. He wrote quickly, his handwriting sharp and clear. "Miss Prescott is to be given every courtesy at Hartwell. The orangery is to be made available to her at any hour. She is to be disturbed by no one." He sealed the letter and rang for his steward. The house party would begin in 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to prove he was not the man he had been 8 years ago. He was not certain it was enough time. Hartwell House rose from the Derbyshire hills like a promise carved in stone. Cecilia stood in the entrance hall with her traveling case at her feet and her portfolio under her arm, and tried not to stare at the vaulted ceiling, the marble floors, the staircase that swept upward in a curve of polished oak. Lady Harriet stood beside her, already smiling at the housekeeper. Rosalind stood on Cecilia's other side, her expression carefully neutral. The housekeeper led them upstairs to adjoining rooms that overlooked the gardens. Cecilia's room was smaller than Rosalind's, but the window faced east, and the morning light would be perfect for working. She set her portfolio on the writing desk and looked out at the grounds. The orangery stood at the far edge of the formal gardens, its glass walls glowing in the afternoon sun. The house party assembled for dinner that evening. 12 guests, including the Prescotts. Lady Harriet had positioned herself and Rosalind near the Duke at every opportunity, her conversation bright and effortless, her daughter serene and beautiful beside her. Cecilia sat 3 seats down and said almost nothing. After dinner, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room. Cecilia excused herself and walked through the gardens toward the orangery. The glass door was unlocked. Inside, the air was warm and damp and green. Rows of potted citrus trees lined the walls, their leaves glossy, their fruit glowing like small suns. Tables held specimen trays, gardening tools, notebooks. At the far end of the room, a workbench stood beneath a skylight. Cecilia set down her portfolio and walked slowly between the rows, touching leaves, bending to examine root systems, breathing in the scent of earth and growth. She did not hear the door open behind her. "Do you approve?" She spun around. The Duke stood in the doorway, his coat gone, his sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked different in the orangery's soft light, less formal, less guarded. "Your Grace, I did not mean to intrude." "You are not intruding. I asked the housekeeper to tell you the orangery was available." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "I thought you might prefer it to the drawing room." "I do," he smiled. It was a small smile, but it reached his eyes. "Good." He crossed to the workbench and gestured to the stool. "Will you show me what you have brought?" Cecilia hesitated, then opened her portfolio. She laid out 4 plates: the digitalis purpurea, the rosa gallica, the bellus perennis, the the corrected Linnaeus engravings. He bent over them in silence, his hands flat on the table, his gaze moving slowly from one plate to the next. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "These are extraordinary. Thank you." No, he looked up at her. "I do not mean they are lovely. I mean they are correct, precise. If I were a physician in the field, I would trust these. That is the point." "I know." He straightened. "How many have you completed?" 47. "Have you submitted them for publication?" "I have corresponded with a publisher through a bookseller in London. They are interested in a herbal guide. 12 plates to start. Under your own name. Under C.W. Prescott." He nodded slowly. "And if they knew you were a woman, they would decline." "Yes." He looked at the plates again. "They would be fools, but yes." Cecilia felt something loosen in her chest. She had not realized how tightly she had been holding herself. "May I come here again?" she asked. "You may come here whenever you like." He met her eyes. "I will leave you to your work." He walked to the door, then paused. "Miss Prescott, Your Grace, thank you for bringing your Linnaeus." He left. Cecilia stood alone in the orangery, surrounded by green and light, and felt for the first time in her life that she had been seen. The days at Hartwell fell into a pattern. Lady Harriet orchestrated walks, card games, and drawing-room conversations that placed Rosalind beside the Duke at every turn. He attended with perfect courtesy, his manners impeccable, his attention polite and distant. Every evening after dinner, he excused himself and walked to the orangery. Cecilia was always there. They did not speak much. He would sit on the stool beside her workbench and watch her draw, occasionally asking a question about technique or classification. She would answer without looking up, her brush moving steadily, her focus complete. On the 4th evening, he asked, "Why foxglove?" "Because it is both remedy and poison. The dose determines which, and you trust yourself to know the difference." She looked up at him. "I trust myself to draw it accurately, so that someone else can make that choice." He nodded slowly. "That is a different kind of trust." "Yes." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "My brother fell in love with a vicar's daughter 8 years ago. I told him it was impractical." Cecilia set down her brush. "He listened to me," the Duke continued. "He broke with her. She married someone else. He joined the Navy. He has not spoken to me since." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because when your mother dismissed you in Lady Cavendish's salon, I heard my own voice, the voice that told my brother his love was inconvenient." He met her eyes. "I crossed the room because I could not bear to be that man again." "Are you that man?" "I do not know. I am trying not to be." She picked up her brush again. Her hand was steady. "Then keep trying." He stayed until she finished the plate. On the 6th evening, Lady Harriet discovered the correspondence. Cecilia returned to her room after dinner to find her mother standing beside the writing desk, a letter in her hand. "What is this?" Lady Harriet's voice was cold. Cecilia's stomach dropped. "Mama, C.W. Prescott." Lady Harriet read from the letter, her tone mocking. "We are pleased to inform you that the commission for 12 botanical plates has been approved pending final review. You have been submitting drawings to a publisher." "Yes, under a false name, under my name, under a man's name." Lady Harriet's composure cracked. "Do you have any idea what you have done? If this becomes known, if anyone discovers that you have been masquerading as a man, pretending to scholarship, you will be a laughingstock. Rosalind will be tainted by association. Everything I have built will collapse." "I have built something too, Mama." "You have built nothing." Lady Harriet's voice was shaking. "You have put your sister's future at risk for the sake of drawings no one will ever care about." She tore the letter in half. Cecilia lunged forward. No, Lady Harriet stepped back, the pieces fluttering to the floor. "You will stop this immediately. You will write to this Mr. Thorne and tell him the commission was fraudulent. You will destroy whatever drawings you have brought to this house, and you will stay away from the Duke. Mama, he is here for Rosalind, not for you. You have been scheming for his attention, and it ends now." She swept out of the room. Cecilia stood frozen, staring at the torn letter on the floor. She knelt and gathered the pieces with shaking hands. The dinner party 2 nights later was a formal affair. 20 guests, including several families from the surrounding estates. Cecilia wore the ivory muslin and sat near the far end of the table. Lady Harriet was in her element, her conversation sparkling, her attention on the Duke, and Rosalind with the focus of a woman who had spent 20 years perfecting this performance. Midway through the third course, she turned to the table at large and said with a laugh that carried just far enough, "Your Grace, you have been so patient with both my daughters. Rosalind, of course, is a delight. But Cecilia, well, she prefers books to company. We have quite given up on her." The table went silent. Cecilia's hands stilled on her fork. The Duke set down his glass. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Then you have given up on the most perceptive person at this table." Lady Harriet's smile faltered. "Miss Cecilia Prescott," the Duke continued, "is correcting the botanical engravings in the second volume of Linnaeus's Systema Naturae. The original plates are inadequate for field identification. Hers are not. If I were a physician, I would trust her work over the published standard." The silence was absolute. He looked directly at Cecilia. "I have not given up on her. I suggest you reconsider." He returned to his meal. Across the table, Rosalind caught Cecilia's eye. Her sister's expression was fierce and bright. She mouthed 2 words, "I know." After dinner, Cecilia walked quickly down the corridor toward her room. Her hands were shaking. Her chest was tight. Footsteps behind her. "Cecilia." She turned. Rosalind stood in the corridor, her face flushed, her hands clenched at her sides. "I know what Mama said to you," Rosalind said. "I heard her." Cecilia shook her head. "Rosalind, you do not need to." "Yes, I do." Rosalind stepped closer. "I know about your drawings. I have known for months. I found your portfolio in the greenhouse last spring." Cecilia stared at her. "They are beautiful," Rosalind continued. "They are better than beautiful. They are true." Her voice cracked. "And I know what it is like to do something because Mama tells you. It is the only thing about you worth seeing. Rosalind, I do not want to marry the Duke." The words fell between them like stones. Cecilia's breath caught. "What?" Rosalind's eyes were bright with tears. "I am in love with Lieutenant James Fordham. He is stationed in Portsmouth. We have been writing to each other for 2 years. I hide his letters inside my sheet music." Cecilia felt the world tilt. "I play piano because Mama told me it was the only way I would ever matter," Rosalind said. "But I do not love it. I love James. And I thought when the Duke looked at you instead of me, I thought I might finally be free. Does Mama know? She found one of his letters 3 days ago. She burned it. She told me if I had been playing the fool with a sailor while she secured a Duke, this family would starve." Rosalind's voice was shaking. "She is tightening the cage, Cecilia, for both of us." Cecilia reached for her sister's hand. Rosalind gripped it hard. "I do not want to be the beautiful one anymore," Rosalind whispered. "I want to be myself." "Then we will both be ourselves," Cecilia said, "and we will do it together." Marcus found Cecilia in the orangery. An hour later, she was standing at the workbench, staring at a blank sheet of paper. "Your mother wrote to the publisher," he said quietly. Cecilia turned. "How do you know?" "Because my steward intercepted the letter. She sent it through the Hartwell post." He crossed to the workbench and set the letter in front of her. She claimed the submissions were fraudulent. She demanded the commission be revoked. Cecilia's hands curled into fists. "I did not send it," Marcus said. "But you need to know she tried. She is trying to destroy the only thing I have ever made. That is mine." "Yes." Cecilia looked up at him. "Why did you stop the letter?" "Because you deserve to be heard." He hesitated. "And because I know what it is like to silence someone who should have been heard." She studied his face. "Your brother." "Yes." "What happened?" He told her. "All of it. The Dowager's ultimatum." His reasonable, devastating voice explaining to Frederick why love must yield to propriety. Catherine, Holt marrying a Bristol merchant. Frederick joining the Navy. 8 years of silence. When he finished, Cecilia's voice was steady and cold. "You did exactly what my mother does. You decided someone's love was inconvenient and made it disappear." Marcus absorbed the blow without flinching. "Yes. And now you want me to believe you have changed. I want you to decide whether I have changed. Then prove it." She stepped closer. "Write to your brother. Not for my sake. For his. Tell him the truth. Tell him you were wrong. And do it before you ask anything else of me. That is not a condition. That is a verdict. It is both." He nodded slowly. "Then I will write the letter." He left her alone in the orangery, surrounded by green and light, and the weight of choices that could not be undone. Marcus sat in his study that night and stared at a blank sheet of paper for an hour before he began to write. Frederick, I have no right to expect you to read this. I have no right to expect anything from you. But I am writing because I owe you the truth, and I have owed it to you for 8 years. I was wrong. When grandmother told me to speak to you about Catherine Holt, I did not question her. I did not question the system that said a vicar's daughter was not enough. I looked at your love and decided it was inconvenient. I used reason as a weapon. I made you doubt yourself. I made you believe that choosing her would be selfish, impractical, impossible. I was wrong. You loved her. She loved you. That was enough. It should have been enough. I should have stood with you against grandmother, against convention, against all of it. I did not. I chose the system over you. I chose appearance over truth. I do not expect forgiveness. I do not expect you to write back. But you deserve to know that I have spent 8 years understanding what I did, and that I would undo it if I could. If you ever come home, I will tell you this in person. Until then, I am telling you now. I was wrong. You were right. And I am sorry. Marcus, he sealed the letter and sent it to Portsmouth that night. The musicale was scheduled for the final evening of the house party. Lady Harriet had arranged everything. Rosalind would play. The Duke would be seated in the front row. 40 guests would attend. It would be perfect. Cecilia sat in her room the afternoon before the event and stared at her portfolio. Inside were 12 plates, the digitalis purpurea, the rosa gallica, the bellus perennis, the corrected Linnaeus engravings. 8 more studies she had completed in the orangery over the past 2 weeks. She thought of her mother's voice. We have quite given up on her. She thought of the Duke's response. Then you have given up on the most perceptive person at this table. She thought of Rosalind's confession. I do not want to be the beautiful one anymore. She closed the portfolio and walked downstairs to find her sister. The music room at Hartwell House was lit with candles. 40 guests filled the chairs. Lady Harriet sat in the front row beside the Duke, her expression serene and triumphant. Rosalind entered in a gown of pale blue silk. She walked to the piano, sat on the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. The room waited. She did not play. The silence stretched. Lady Harriet leaned forward. Rosalind lifted her hands from the keys. She turned to face the room. Her voice was clear and steady. I am tired of performing, Mama. Lady Harriet's composure shattered. Rosalind, sit down this instant. I have been sitting at this bench since I was 9. Not because I love music. Because you told me it was the only thing about me worth seeing. Rosalind stood. I do not want to play anymore. The room was frozen. Lady Harriet's face was white. She turned to Cecilia, her voice shaking with fury. Cecilia, sit down and play something. Now. Cecilia rose from her seat at the back of the room. She walked to the piano. The crowd parted for her. She sat on the bench Rosalind had vacated. The room expected music. She opened her leather portfolio on the music stand. Lady Harriet's voice was sharp. Cecilia, what are you? Cecilia lifted out 4 plates and laid them carefully on the piano's polished lid. She looked across the room and found the man the Duke had quietly invited 3 days ago. Sir Reginald Beaumont, publisher, scholar. The man who had been corresponding with C.W. Prescott for 6 months. Sir Reginald, Cecilia said clearly. Would you examine these, please? Beaumont rose and crossed to the piano. He bent over the plates in silence. The room held its breath. He studied the digitalis purpurea for a long moment. Then the rosa gallica. Then the corrected Linnaeus engravings. When he finally looked up, his expression was grave. Who is C.W. Prescott? Cecilia met his eyes. I am. Lady Harriet made a strangled sound. Cecilia, this is absurd. This was not. Beaumont did not look at her. He kept his gaze on Cecilia. These are publishable. More than publishable. The Linnaeus corrections alone are definitive. He turned to the room. I have been corresponding with C.W. Prescott for 6 months. I assumed I was writing to a Cambridge fellow. He looked back at Cecilia. I was writing to the quiet one. The room erupted in whispers. Cecilia stood. She walked around the piano to face her mother. Lady Harriet's face was a mask of rage and humiliation. You have ruined everything. No. Cecilia's voice was steady. You burned my foxglove study when I was 12. You used it as kindling because you forgot it existed. You burned Rosalind's letters because you remembered they existed. You destroy whatever we make is not part of your plan. She took a breath. I am not part of your plan anymore. Neither is she. Rosalind stepped forward and took Cecilia's hand. Lady Harriet stared at them. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Cecilia turned to Sir Reginald. I have 47 plates completed. I can deliver 12 within the month. I will take all 47, Beaumont said, under your own name. Cecilia Prescott. Yes, the room broke into chaos. Voices rising, chairs scraping, Lady Harriet's furious whisper as someone led her from the room. Marcus sat in the front row and did not move. He watched Cecilia stand beside the piano, her sister's hand in hers, and prove herself without his voice, his title, or his intervention. He had crossed the room 2 weeks ago. She had crossed it tonight. She had not needed him. That, he realized, was the entire point. The room emptied slowly. Guests departed in clusters, their voices bright with gossip. Sir Reginald Beaumont left with Cecilia's portfolio under his arm and a promise to send contracts within the week. Rosalind found Cecilia in the corridor, outside the music room, and hugged her hard. I am going to write to James tonight. Good. What will you do? I will finish the plates. Rosalind pulled back, her eyes shining. And the Duke? Cecilia shook her head. I do not know. He has been watching you all evening. I know. Cecilia, go write your letter, Cecilia said gently. I will be fine. Rosalind kissed her cheek and left. Cecilia stood alone in the corridor, her hands shaking, her heart still pounding. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Marcus stood in the doorway of the music room, his face unreadable. You did not need me, he said quietly. No good. He crossed to her slowly. I must tell you something, and after I tell you, you may decide I have no right to be in this corridor. Cecilia waited. When your mother dismissed you in Lady Cavendish's salon, he said, I heard myself. I heard the man who looked at a vicar's daughter and said not enough. I crossed the room because I could not bear to be that man again. But you deserve to know that my interest in you began as reckoning before it became anything else. When did it become something else? The night in the orangery when you told me the Linnaeus plates were inadequate and spent 40 minutes proving it. You were not performing for me. You were not performing for anyone. You were simply yourself. He took a breath, and I realized that reckoning does not make a man sit in a greenhouse for 6 evenings in a row, just to watch someone draw a foxglove. What do you want from me? I want to earn the right to sit in the room while you work, and I want you to tell me whether a man who destroyed one quiet love deserves to be trusted with another. Cecilia studied his face. Write to your brother first. That is not a condition. That is a verdict. It is both. Write to Frederick. Tell him the truth. Not for my sake, for his. And then come back to the orangery. Is that a yes? It is a diagnosis. You are guilty, and you know it. That is more than most men manage. Now write the letter. He nodded slowly. I already have. Cecilia's breath caught. When? The night you told me to. And I sent it to Portsmouth 3 weeks ago. I do not know if he will reply. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, the Rosa Gallica needs better light. You are useful for holding specimens. Is that a yes? It is an invitation. Do not waste it. He smiled. It was a real smile, unguarded and warm. I will not, he said. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at Hartwell House. The handwriting was unfamiliar. The seal was marked with an anchor. Marcus opened it alone in his study. Marcus, I received your letter. I do not know what to say. I have spent 8 years being angry at you. I am not ready to stop, but I read what you wrote, and I believe you meant it. I am coming home at Christmas. We will talk then. Frederick Marcus sat at his desk and stared at the letter until his vision blurred. The silence was broken. It was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. He folded the letter carefully and walked to the orangery. Cecilia was bent over the workbench, her brush moving in short, precise strokes. The morning light poured through the glass roof, turning her hair gold. She did not look up when he entered. Beaumont wrote this morning, Marcus said. He wants 12 more plates. I know. He wrote to me as well. He addressed you as Miss Prescott, your own name. She set down the pencil. Her hand was trembling, not with fear, but with the accumulated weight of 23 years of being unseen and 1 night of being seen by everyone. He crossed the orangery. She did not stand. He knelt beside her stool, lowering himself to where she was. He took her drawing hand, graphite-stained and steady, and pressed his mouth to her knuckles. Then her wrist. She gripped his wrist with her free hand. "You have graphite on your chin," he said quietly. "I always have graphite on my chin." "I know." He kissed her. She kissed him back with the fierce, shaking relief of a woman who had been invisible her entire life, and was now, finally, the one being looked at. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. "Your brother wrote back," she said. "Yes." "What did he say?" "That he is coming home at Christmas. That we will talk." "That is not forgiveness." "No. But it is a beginning." She nodded. "Then you had better learn to be honest by then. You have 3 months. You are a very difficult woman. You are a very slow man. It balances out." He laughed. It was a sound she had never heard from him before. From the house, faint and clear, came the sound of a piano. Rosalind, playing something she had chosen herself. Not scales, not Marchetti. Something new. "Your sister is improving," Marcus said. "She was always brilliant. She simply had the wrong audience." He stood and pulled her to her feet. She did not resist. "Will you come to Hartwell for Christmas?" he asked. "Will your brother be there?" "Yes." "Then yes. And after Christmas, I have 47 plates to finish. I am aware. You may hold specimens." "I am honored." She smiled. It was the first real smile he had seen from her. "Good," she said. "Now sit down. The Rosa Gallica needs your hands." Months later, the morning light poured through the Ashfield greenhouse like liquid gold. Cecilia sat at her work table with a brush in one hand and a proof sheet in the other. A corrected botanical illustration of the Linnaeus system by Cecilia Prescott. Her name, in print. Marcus arrived with a package from the publisher. He set it on the workbench beside her specimen trays. "The first edition sold out in 2 weeks." "I know. Of course you do." From the house came the sound of piano. Rosalind, playing something bright and imperfect, learned badly and repeated with pleasure. She had written to Lieutenant James Fordham. He had written back. He would visit in the spring. Lady Harriet had left Ashfield 3 months ago to live with her sister in Bath. She had not written. Cecilia did not miss her. Marcus sat on the stool beside the workbench. She handed him a specimen, Bellis perennis, common daisy, and adjusted his hand to the angle the light required. Her thumb pressed the back of his wrist. She drew. The greenhouse door stood open. Through it, piano music and morning light. 2 sisters no longer performing. A man sitting still while a woman worked. "What does the quiet one do?" someone had asked once, in a salon full of candles. "This, she does this, and she does it under her own name."